Namaskar. In this episode of Dilse, we're going to talk about something that members of parliament don't talk about. They don't talk about the lives of ordinary people, what state of penury they are in. They talk about love jihad, they talk about divisive politics, they talk about the legacy of Ambedkar, which is of course all relevant, but they never talked about the real issues that confront the people of this country. Now, what are the real issues? That's the economy of this country. What's the state of our economy? And there are two aspects to that. Number one, in the new global setup, with Trump coming to power, with wars continuing in the Middle East, with Israel continuing to target the Palestinians, with the war going on in Ukraine, what impact does it have on the Indian economy? And recent statements of President Trump have troubled a lot of countries because he's threatened to raise tariffs. What impact will that have on India and on the Indian economy? In what manner are we dependent on the Chinese economy? Can we decouple our economy from the Chinese economy? In fact, I believe America can't even decouple itself from the Chinese economy. So is this all bravado? What's the real story? What impact will the new global scenario have on the Indian economy? That's one aspect. And the other is what's happening in the Indian economy. Our per capita income is about $2,540, which is much less than a developed country where the per capita income is $20,000. We're less than the BRICS countries even in terms of per capita. Our rate of savings is down. There are great inequalities in the economic structure of our country. Some people are exceptionally rich. By and large, 80% of the people of our country earn less than 5,000 rupees a month. So where are we going? There is high food inflation. There is a wealth gap. Where real wages are stagnant. Savings rate is falling. Farmers are in distress. These are issues that are confronting people in this country, and nobody talks about them. So we have a fabulous panel to talk about these things today. We have Nitin Desai, who has been an international civil servant, United Nations civil servant, earned his economic degree in the University of Bombay, and then, of course, the London School of Economics. You began teaching in the United Kingdom, later contributed to India's economic analysis through Tata Economic Consultancy Service, joined India's Planning Commission in 1973, developed cost-benefit appraisal systems, served in various advisory roles, chief economic advisor in the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, 88 to 90. You coordinated government budgets. In 90, you joined the United Nations as Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. At the United Nations, you played a pivotal role in the Rio Earth Summit 1992 and led the Department for Policy Coordination and Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for being here. Pronab, another, of course, my college mate in a sense, from St. Stephen's, then got a doctorate from Johns Hopkins. Before that, went to George Washington University and began as a consultant and academic before joining the Indian Council for Research and International Economic Relations, then joined Government of India as economic advisor, Department of Electronics, where you shaped the National Software Policy of 1990 and the Software Technology Park Policy of 1991, principal advisor at the Planning Commission, 1994 to 2007. You authored key five-year plans and midterm appraisals. Then you are the first chief statistician, 2007 to 2010. You modernized statistical frameworks and aligned them with global standards. So there it is. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
And of course, my old friend, Sanjaya Baru, right? Economist, journalist, author, policy advisor, bachelor's degree, doctor of philosophy, economics. Of course, you're a JNU product.
That's right.
Right? And well, that's always a matter of controversy. You started as a journalist with Economic Times, Financial Express, and alongside journalism, you played academic roles, again, in the Indian Council for Research and International Economic Relations, Center for Policy Research, and other institutions. Served as advisor during the time when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, the chief spokesperson to the Prime Minister, and a member of the National Security Advisory Board. What else? Author, you controversial book you wrote on the accidental Prime Minister, which caused a lot of debate, but a candid memoir, as I would say. The other works are India and the World, essays on geoeconomics and foreign policy, and how P.V. Narasimha-Rao-ji made history. So thank you very much for being here today. But let me ask you, start with you, Nitin. How do you view the Indian economy in the context of what's happening around the world?
I think basically the Indian economy has a very peculiar problem. You know, our exports go to United States and European Union in a large measure, about more than 35% of the exports go there. And we do import from them, but we have fairly substantial surpluses there. When it comes to Russia and China, that basically are the stuff we import from them. There are hardly any exports that go from India to Russia or China. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, we are going to be caught in a situation where a group of people who are our major export clients are at dispute with people who are major import. China is a very important import source for us.
Sure.
Look at,
we're going to talk about that.
Absolutely. Renewable energy would have been very difficult without the Chinese.
Pharmaceuticals.
So India has a very great challenge. It cannot afford to lose connection with either of them.
Right.
How will they do that if Trump has an open conflict with China? This is going to be one of the great challenges. I have no answer for it, but this is a challenge which they will face. They cannot afford to separate.
But our proximity with the United States at this point?
Well, yes, but they may push you into going against China.
Well, we can't afford to. We can't afford to for the simple reason that a lot of our imports of, say, pharmaceutical ingredients themselves and many other electronic products, many products of China. What do you say? What do you think? How is it going to impact the Indian economy?
Well, it depends on what scenarios you're playing out. But the fact of the matter is that on the export side, I think we are much less vulnerable. If we play the domestic market the way we could play it. So I don't think that is a huge issue. The big issue is our import dependence.
Yes.
And that's something which we need to be very careful about. So, I think you talked about pharmaceuticals. If you remember, the end of the 90s, we used to produce about 80 to 85% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients that were needed in this country. Today, we import 80%.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, we did something wrong.
All from China.
And all from China. An entire lot from China.
Yes.
So we did something seriously wrong. We've started to pivot. But at least on the pharmaceutical side, we do have the technology, we do have the knowledge, we do have the experience. On the electronic side, we are really very, very vulnerable.
It's true.
I am not even sure whether our military capabilities are dependent upon inputs from China, particularly electronic inputs. As we go more and more electronic warfare, is our vulnerability increasing? That's something we won't know because the technologies that are used in the military are closely guarded secret, and rightly so. Yes. But at least that's something we need to look at and look at very, very carefully. Because that's the last thing we can afford to slip up on.
Sanjay?
Well, I think first of all, we cannot dismiss the challenge on the export side, Pranab. I think the fact is that Trump is serious. I mean, and not just Trump. I think it's wrong to look at what the United States proposes to do purely as a problem that Trump poses. Every single step that Trump took, Biden continued, including the withdrawal of the generalized system of preferences, etc. The United States is battling for itself. I mean, America first is Trump's slogan, make America great again. So the US is trying to protect its space in the global economy. And Trump has just yesterday identified India specifically, named India, saying that, I'm going to raise tariffs against India. And that's going to be a challenge. We have been trying to negotiate free trade agreements with European Union and the UK, and they're going nowhere. So we have a challenge on the export side. On the import side, there's an interesting game at play. The Chinese have said, okay, we'll try and help you reduce your import dependence, allow us to invest in India and make in India, so that we don't have to export to you, but we'll manufacture. And this has started an interesting debate, because the Economic Survey first flagged this issue by saying we should allow Chinese investments. Niti Aayog has recently followed it up with a statement in a recent report that we should allow Chinese imports. And it remains to be seen what decision the government will take and what Nirmala Sitharaman will say in her budget speech. But there is a possibility that we will try to address the challenge on the import side by opening up on the investment front. But apart from the fact that trade poses a challenge, growth too poses a challenge. I mean, the global economy has slowed down. There are growth constraints emerging. China has slowed down itself, which is a major engine of growth.
Especially the real estate sector is hit from
Also, in terms of its own consumption of goods. And if Trump starts increasing tariffs, there would be a decline in US demand.
But can he afford to do that? I mean, the question is, his economy is so tied up with the Chinese economy. Can he afford to decouple it?
They're not. First of all, they're not talking of decoupling, right? The word now is de-risking. So the talk of decoupling is gone 2 years back, when the former, the lady who's now going to step down as Treasury Secretary, said that we are no longer in the game of decoupling, we are de-risking. So they have already conceded a certain weakness by declaring the fact that they cannot afford to decouple from China. But the other challenge for us is that even the countries that are decoupling, European Union, other, US itself, are looking for what's called a China plus one strategy, in which we don't figure. I mean, the countries that have benefited from this China plus one strategy over the last 3-4 years are Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia.
Can you just explain to those who
the
are
China
listening
plus one strategy is companies which were dependent on China for their manufacturing or imports move away from China to a third country. So
That's right.
US firms which were operating out of China move out of China. And then where do they go? They go to Vietnam. They
don't come to India.
They don't come to India, except I think Apple. So far, we have not had any major American investment.
When they come to India, they come to the south.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's
No,
true.
but Kapil, if I may comment on this as well.
Well, let me see, all these GCCs, most of them are in the south.
Yes.
Yes. that's
Essentially, there's a big difference in India. The south is very well placed.
That's true.
And even west to some extent is very well placed to do well in the sort of global environment you're going to be.
The Hindi heartland is too concerned with other things.
Let me
other
also
than
just
economic.
mention one thing. China's going ahead pretty well on many technology areas. Electric vehicles, batteries, solar pumps, AI, etc. And today the number of registrations of patents which are WIPO registered is shot up like anything from China.
Yes.
We must remember, if we look at our future, that we are talking about a country which is going to be a dominant force, not just in military terms, but in technological terms also.
Absolutely.
We should not ignore that practical reality. I just thought
I know the economic momentum is actually moving away, except for really high technology items, from the United States to China.
Yeah, but I was just going to talk about this China plus one. If you think about it from the perspective of the Americans, right? You made one mistake, which was you over-invested in China. You transferred all your technology to China.
That's right.
And today China is your number one threat. India poses a similar conundrum. India is another large country, a country with abundant talent.
Yes.
So if you have China plus one, you may not actually get a balance. You may actually be creating a much bigger headache for yourself. It makes much more sense for the US to go for small countries who in and of themselves cannot pose a challenge.
True. Like Israel.
Like Israel.
Or Vietnam.
Like Vietnam.
Like Vietnam.
With the biggest of enemies,
That's
right?
right.
India is a threat.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's looking at us as a potential superpower. Supposing we become a superpower and we start asserting ourselves, we are going to be another China as far as the US is concerned. So I can quite see why we are not making it in China +1. It would be stupid of them to do so.
We just don't have the infrastructure of yours.
Well, that apart, but I think this is much more strategic.
Also, the fact is, most of the guys from outside who want to invest in India want to invest in India for the Indian market.
For the Indian market.
That's correct.
There may be an exception,
Not
like
for export.
Apple. But most of the fellows who come here are really
Because they
interested.
see the consumption potential. They
Yes,
see
that's
the
a potential.
yeah.
They're not interested in making us part of a global system.
No, but also we have to recognize that it's not just that foreigners are not investing enough in India. Indians are not investing enough in India. In fact,
Yes.
there's an outward FDI
Yes, absolutely.
going out of India.
No doubt about it.
Is as significant as the inward FDI, right? So there is a problem here. It's
The
not
problem is politics, of course.
politics,
It is
infrastructure,
politics.
ease of doing business. I mean, it's not easy to do business in this country for, period. That's
I think can we move to this, because this is very crucial. I think he's absolutely right. Today, the greatest challenge I see in the economy is that what we started in 1991, which is a major shift from the public sector to the private sector, has not improved. The reality is that the private, first, the share of manufacturing in
Gone down to
coming down.
15.9%.
Yes, it's coming down drastically. Second, the scale at which the private sector is taking chances is very low. And in fact, there is a significant shortage of investments by the private sector. Third, we are not increasing the liberalization. We are tightening it. We are not making it a market-friendly economy. We are making it a business-friendly economy.
few businesses.
Well, maybe more
I don't
than
know
two.
how business friendly we are, quite frankly, Nitin, for the reason, if you look at our laws
Yeah.
that are now
Yes, that's-
being enacted, I mean, this is the surest way to tell the business community, you better not invest in India
Yes.
because we'll get after you, right? In fact, what we're doing is entirely contrary to creating an environment to have somebody invest in India.
Absolutely.
One issue where I wrote a column praising Nirmala Sitharaman, being a former student of JNU, as you mentioned.
That's
was-
camaraderie.
Pardon?
That's camaraderie.
That's camaraderie. Was her 2019 budget speech, in which she had this famous line, which she would have picked up as a student at JNU, that I'm stepping up public investment in order to encourage more private investment. This was, rejecting what used to be called the Washington consensus, that public investment drives out private investment. She was saying, I'm actually increasing public investment in order to make it more attractive for private investment. And I said, this is a very sensible strategy. Now, 4 years down the road, you look at the numbers. Public investment has actually slowed down because the government doesn't have the money to sustain a lot of the investments it began. But private investment is not picking up. And so the strategy of 2019 of triggering increase in private investment through an increase in public investment has actually not worked out.
No, I mean, again, I think we need to nuance this a bit. If you separate private investment into corporate investments, which is large corporates, and the MSME, the medium, small, and medium enterprises, the corporates are investing. It's the MSMEs which are not. Right? Now, but even in the corporates, the most interesting, most fascinating thing about the data that the corporate sector is throwing up is that for 3 years, despite investments happening, their capacity utilization is stuck at 75%.
Oh, I see.
It's not going up, it's not going down.
Exactly.
So they are investing just enough for them to be where they want. They are not thinking. This is the point that was
And
what
not
made
only that,
just
they are
they're
not
not
looking
thinking
ahead.
big. They're not thinking ahead.
Where
They're
do I
not taking
see-
a long-term.
Where do I see corporates sufficiently interested in the technologies of the future? How many of them are there? They all say we're going to set up this and unit, that unit, but the reality is their spending on research is negligible.
Yeah.
This is one of India's great tragedies, that our spending on research is
What? It's about
Set
50,
almost
50,
entirely
$50 billion as compared
Yeah,
to
that's-
$600 billion.
Yes, it is compared to even other countries, it is ridiculously low.
Ridiculous.
So there is no sense of, we must, if I had to advise the government, I'd say your job is to become less interfering with the government. Now, whatever is that? They've started, a bureaucrat decides what is the right thing to manufacture under PLI, are you doing it properly, and it will be company by company. I think this is absurd. This is no way to run a large economy. Huh?
I mean, this is the way we ran it when we had the permit license Raj.
Yes,
Right, we
except
did exactly
yeah,
that.
but one difference. At the time of the permit difference, Raj, your dependence on the private sector was modest. The major dependence was on the public sector. Now you've changed it to make it a dependence largely on the private. Public sector has become almost unimportant now.
True.
And in this time, you can't afford to do that. You have to recognize that it's their dynamism, their forward-looking.
So you say that Atmanirbhar Bharat is going nowhere, has gone nowhere.
Where? Where is the
No,
evidence?
it isn't already.
The target set, if you remember, Kapilji, when you were in government, in 2006, the Krishnamurthy Commission that Manmohan Singh set up presented its report, which in fact was the original Make in India strategy, right? And became part of the 12th plan, which is called the chapter called Manufacturing Strategy. In 2006, we set the target that by 2020, share of manufacturing and national
Will be
income go up.
25%.
Exactly.
And it's now 14%.
Yes,
And it's still
From 17%.
And it's actually come down during the 10 years of Make in India.
that's
Make
right.
in
And they
India
had
was
to
lo-
create 100 million jobs.
Yeah.
Not
It
happened.
was set up in 2014. We are now 10 years. The first 5 years, it was around 17%. The last 5 years, it's been about 14%.
Yeah, it's about 14.
So it's completely failed. And they still tom-tom about, Atmanirbhar Bharat because there's some collaboration at the high-end defense sector. And they keep on talking about it.
But even in defense, I mean, our external dependence remains critical. The
Of course.
Air Chief has, made a statement some time back. The Indian Air Force cannot function without importing aircraft, right? It just cannot function. Navy, we are building some ships, but as far as submarines are concerned, we are still dependent on imports. Armed forces, okay, some tanks, etc., guns we are manufacturing. But when push comes to shove, for example, in 2020, when the Chinese turned up on the border, we became critically dependent on the United States for support. Without the US support in 2020, we could not have taken on China.
That's correct. Now, just let me give you some figures that I have on various sectors, how we are totally dependent on the Chinese. You mentioned, Pranab, about machinery, electronics, and telecom. 88% of the components used by mobile handsets industry are imported from China. countries
And
like China.
similar number is true, by the way, of automobiles.
True.
All the cars you produce.
I'm coming to that. Auto components imports jumped 11% to 220.3 billion. 30% of them are imported from China. If you look at medical devices, 70 to 90% we import. Of that, 80% are from China. If you took at solar power products, we have imported $1.2 billion worth of solar cells and modules, and it's a 208.2% year-on-year increase. So pharmaceuticals, the same thing in pharmaceuticals. Textile raw materials, that also have increased. Communications, telecom industry. We don't produce any hardware in this country. It's only software. So if we are dependent so much on imports and we don't have any technological solutions in terms of hardware, how can we ever become Atmanirbhar Bharat? And how can we ever compete with the rest of the world?
So technological dynamism and greater enterprise in the private sector. But there's a third thing I would like to add, and that is we're seeing a certain absence of demand growth. We're seeing this, all the FMCG companies are complaining for the lack. The reason is inequality, growing inequality. Expensive cars sell, cheaper cars are not increasing that much. So I'd say this is a third thing that I would, apart from opening up the industrial sector to greater enterprises, etc. The third thing is we need something which brings in rising incomes in the lower end, so that there is a larger middle class than what we are getting, because we are facing demand shortages. You ask any company.
Absolutely.
Ask any company.
This is true, but it again brings us back to the point of the MSMEs. So if you think about it, the root of the problem you're talking about is that there is no good employment being created. So the unemployment numbers look all right. It's about 3.5% unemployment. That seems fine. The problem is the moment you start looking at where they are employed.
Yes, that's the
So
problem.
you've got a situation where agriculture, where we are shedding jobs, we had gone from nearly 70% of our population being dependent on agriculture down to 42%.
Correct.
We are back up to 46%. People are going back to agriculture, which in any case had too many people working in it.
Right.
So we have to stop getting hung up on the large numbers and start looking at a little bit of the story that the breakdown of these numbers are telling us. So we are getting a lot of distress employment, people doing whatever they can to survive, which is not going to give rise to the demand growth that you are looking for.
And because remember this, that the numbers that they're telling you on employment includes unpaid family labor.
Yeah.
And that has gone up from 13% to 18%.
Correct.
Over this period. So why do you include unpaid family labor in
Kids
your
between the ages of 15 to 24, the employment rate, unemployment rate is 25, 26%,
28%,
28%.
yeah.
So, so how are we going to deal with this?
So that's the point. So you have to then think about what are the kind of economic activities which would absorb this kind of workforce. And remember, the cohort that we are talking about now are far better educated than the cohort that preceded it.
Right.
Simply because of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan.
But they're not skilled.
Well, they are not skilled, but neither were that lot. But the fact of the matter is that the lot that we have now are more skillable. So they're potentially more employable. The point is, are you creating an environment in which that employment is generated, the skilling process is done? So if you look at skills, for instance, the large Indian corporate sector spends abysmally. You talked about low R&D. Their expenditure on skilling is even lower.
That's correct.
So where does the skilling happen? It happens with the MSMEs who are taking unskilled workers, teaching them on the floor. And then once they reach a level of skill, they get picked up by the other company. Right. That has been the process. Now, if you break that chain, you're going to suffer at both ends. People are not going to get jobs. The large corporates are not going to get skilled people. Right. And that's a lose-lose. So one has to think this through.
See, the point really is, when the Indian economy had done poorly in the 80s and before that, there was actually a debate among both professional economists, policymakers, media, political leadership, recognizing that there's a problem and then looking for solutions. And 1991 became a turning point because a set of solutions was provided. Whether one agrees with them or not, they did have the effect of pushing the rate of growth up, right? So we moved from an average of 3.5 in the pre-80, 3 decades before 80, to an average of 5.5 in the following 2 decades from 80 to 2000. And then we moved up to 7.5 during the UPA era. The problem today is that that debate about the economy not doing well, demand not being adequate, employment not being generated, income growth not being adequate, exports and imports not profit. That debate is happening only within those who are willing to be critical of the government. It is not happening in the media. It is not happening as in parliament, as you mentioned. There is no wider recognition of the problem because we are patting ourselves on the back with India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Absurd.
And we are going to be the third biggest economy.
$5 trillion economy, fastest economy. I mean, it's
so, and the latest statements coming out. Medium-term growth rate is going to be 6.5%. Now, you want to be satisfied with that? So I think
is that real growth? I mean, or is it jugglery of numbers? I'm not
what
sure.
point
I'm going to ask Pranab on
is a
that.
man to
We'll come to the accuracy of growth, but even if it were accurate, even if we accept that it is 6.5, it's not enough. And therefore, the whole focus has to be on how do you get from 6.5 to 7.5 to 8 to, how do you push this up? And then what is the policy changes that are required, whether it's ease of doing business, whether it is addressing the problems of MSMEs or infrastructure, etc. So you have to pay recognition. Now, you look at the statements coming out. Every budget speech of this government is, we have done great, we have done Amrit Kal and Viksit Bharat, and you're praising yourself all the time. So, how do you address the problem?
You can't blame a government for praising itself. But
I'm
the point he mentioned about growth. Now,
I want to know from Pranab.
Yes, he's done a piece which says that how can you have 6% growth of GDP and only 3% growth of consumption? He has raised this question. I think he should.
What's the real number, Pranab?
No. Look, we need to break this up a little bit. So, given as things stand today, the maximal sustainable growth rate, and I use the word maximal advisedly, is around 6.5%. Okay? That doesn't mean you're going to be there, because the likelihood is you're going to stay under that someplace. Whether that's 6% or 5.5%, that's not known yet. It depends on other things. But that's the maximal you have at the moment. So there are two things that we need to think about. The first is that if the maximal is 6.5%, you can't be satisfied with this. That 7.5 is the minimum we need. Right? Now, how are you going to push it up? Well, the first step in that is that you should be as close to that 6.5% as possible. So people see that the maximal is achievable. If you hang around 6%, you're going to have the average businessman saying, look, we are never being allowed to operate at full capacity. Why should I have ambitious plans? So you have to get to that 6.5 on a sustained basis. At the moment, whatever be the numbers in the last couple of years, because of the COVID base effect, if you look at it from 2019-20 till now, we are averaging a little over 4.5%.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. We've got a ways to go. Okay? But as I said, so you have to start first. If we can go to a situation where for 2, 3, 4 years, we are at 6.5%, then we have hopes of pushing it up. But if we don't get there,
that's a problem.
Then you have a problem. Because then you cannot be more ambitious than that.
Let me pose a question to you. You say that the corporate sector says, why should I produce more? Because the corporate sector will say, unless there is demand, why would I produce more? Why would I create an inventory which I cannot sell? And demand can only happen if you put more money in the pockets of ordinary people. So if incomes don't grow, there will be no demand. If there's no demand, the corporate sector will not increase production. So how do you get money back into the pockets of people? And what are the policy frameworks which should happen to make that happen?
At the moment, the answer is freebies. Give money. It doesn't amount to much. It doesn't amount to much.
I mean, if you ask me, it's counterproductive.
It's counterproductive.
And it's counterproductive, pointless, and it doesn't really amount to
much.
So
how do you put money in the pockets of people to ensure that there is greater demand?
Can I
how
make
do you do that? And what are the policy prescriptions?
I say the policy prescription now really depends very much on what happens at the local level. Why is Tamil Nadu doing well? Tamil Nadu is doing well in terms the average wage level is about twice the national average.
The national average.
It's about twice the national average. They have a large number of migrants. The number of migrants who are working in the Apple store was close to 40% or something are migrants.
Yeah, but if you have, political agendas which disturb the peace in the Hindi heartland, how will you have companies wanting
that
to
is
grow?
the thing. When Ford wanted to leave in Tamil Nadu, the Tamil Nadu government helped them. And because now of that, now when Ford wants to come back, it wants to come back to Tamil Nadu.
No, but,
So that's the difference.
So let me,
no, but Kapil, again, let's be very clear on this. There is no part of the country which doesn't have potential for economic activity.
sure.
The point is, you can't have the same size fits all.
Right.
So Tamil Nadu would be able to attract large industries,
It is doing
and
it.
it will do so. But that does not mean Bihar and UP cannot have small industries.
Yeah.
Right? But the point that I was making is a valid one. It depends entirely on how the state supports economic activity, not business per se, but economic activity.
Right.
So the mindset that if you're small, what can we do to help you? And more importantly, what can we help you? How can we help you to grow? That should be the mindset. Now, so far as growth is concerned, unfortunately, contrary to popular opinion, it's not entirely in the hands of the state. For growth, you need funds.
Right.
For the Indian economy as it is currently constructed, the funds are really coming only from the banks.
True.
And that's completely controlled by the center.
Right.
So anything that a state wants to do will have to have the tacit support of the center. Which means when you talked about cooperative federalism, that's the sort of thing we need to be talking about. I mean,
But I have
But
been
we don't talk about it.
But Pranab, I have been representing several states in several litigations,
right.
including litigations relating to finances.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that the states feel that they are targeted, especially the
yes.
opposition rule states.
Yes.
They feel that they are targeted both by the Finance Commission, I'm sorry to say, right? Because when it comes to allocation of resources and release of resources, as well as borrowings by state governments to raise capital, that's now then controlled by the Reserve Bank of India, and that in turn is directed by the Union, right? So there are a lot of problems there also. I think that we need to change the nature of the federal structure in some sense.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Right.
but that's the point.
But
And-
there has been
With
a
much,
regression.
with much greater flexibility for each state.
Exactly. So unless you do that, and coming to the point that you made, unless you allow that to happen, you will not give impetus to the kind of growth that you're talking about.
This is
You
correct.
know, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister in the UPA 1, he used to actually visit states, capitals. He would go with his senior officers from Delhi, sit with the Chief Minister and his senior cabinet colleagues and secretaries, and have a full day meeting with them, discussing what their priorities and needs were. He did this in several states. I mean, I went with him on each of those occasions. That kind of outreach to the state governments has not happened in these 10 years.
That's because they don't believe in the
There's
planning
been a
commission.
regression.
Well, no, forget
There's
that.
no
They do not
commission.
believe in. They do not believe in federalism.
That's true, that's
so
true.
the interstate council has not been meeting.
Correct.
The
And National Development
Development Council has died.
has never met.
Yes,
Never met.
yes.
Yeah, died.
It's died,
Yeah.
in effect.
Yeah.
So we have no platforms.
Correct.
And the
So the only platform, in fact, is the Niti Aayog.
But it's not
the
that
board
kind of platform.
No, it's supposed to be the board of.
There were formal meetings, with
That's
formal
formal
speeches.
meetings. It's not a exchange of views.
So you don't get inputs from the states.
No.
This is the big problem.
And you don't understand them, even worse.
I'll
need
give
to
you an
understand.
example. When I was education minister, I realized that the education policy that we prescribe here, and like you said, it's not one size that fits all.
yes.
Right? For each state, you need a different education strategy. Now, the government of India doesn't function like that.
An industrial strategy.
This is the problem.
No, but what the point is, the government of India has no business
Exactly.
in having an education policy where education is on the concurrent list.
But unfortunately, it's in the concurrent list, so they now control
now-
it.
now
So
this
the
is
one
the
thing
point.
we must do is get it back into the state list. Get health back into the state list. Right? Unless the fundamentals of health and education are set right, according to me, which is what China did.
Yes.
yes. yes.
Exactly what China
China has empowered their provincial governments far, far more.
Even in industry.
Even in
Industry, the
That's
provincial
correct.
governments are
Across
heavily
the board.
empowered.
Let them
In fact-
compete.
In fact, excessively empowered. That's why they landed up with the property problem. But I would say that the nature of the industrial policy I need in Tamil Nadu is different from the industrial
Yes,
policy
I
need
agree.
in
I
Northeast.
agree. On Maharashtra, it will be different from the Northeast.
Absolutely.
Right, from Himachal.
Allow that variety.
Yes.
I mean, all your surplus labor is going to be in North India. 90% of the increase in the number of working age people
Will be in
is
North
going to be in
India.
the North.
No, the other
And in fact, Tamil Nadu and Kerala are now mostly going the other way around. The decline in working age population.
Here's the interesting thing. We talk a lot about our imports and exports and what an important role they have in our development processes. Every state is importing and exporting from every other state, right? We don't even know what those are. We don't know what the magnitudes are.
I see.
Right?
I've never thought of that.
Think of it that way. States are interdependent entities. Can we do with the states what we do at WTO?
Yeah. Good thought.
Yeah.
That's what institutions like Planning Commission,
Yeah.
National Development
Yeah.
Council
were supposed to
were
be.
supposed to do.
Yeah.
They were the federal system.
But but here we have a data problem. And this, Kapil, is a serious issue. We didn't have information on interstate flows of goods and services. With GST, we have that information now, except nobody has access to it.
Oh, okay.
Even the statistical system
Doesn't get access.
doesn't get the data from the GST
Oh, I see.
network.
But why is that?
We don't know. This is a question that should be asked to the
But
finance
full
minister.
information is available in GST because the GST is different when there's something is moving
Right.
between states.
Right.
Yes, yes.
So the information is there.
The information is there. We would be able
Get
to
a better-
track the precise flow of goods and services across all state borders.
Better understanding of the interlinkages between states is crucial for one of the things that will help also to develop what I would call national value chains.
Yeah.
I agree.
We don't have national value chains.
No, we keep talking about international value chain.
But
Never national value
But the value chains that we have are not really as spread out as they conceivably can be. So I think federalism, greater openness,
Loosening up of the
loosening
federal
up of
system, yes.
the center should not say that we know everything.
I think the basic requirement today is going back to Deng Xiaoping's principle, color the cat is not important as long as it catches mice. You have to have a pragmatic approach to policy.
Exactly.
Reduce this level of excessive interference by investigating agencies, by the tax department.
This is key. That's key, according to
key.
Yes.
This is
Without
investor
that,
confidence.
Yes.
I'll tell you a story. I mean, sometime back before the last election, I was invited to speak to a group of MSME businessmen. And I was told by the person who invited me that, they're all supporters of the BJP. So I better be careful in what I say. So I said, I have no problem. And the discussion was on
You
the
see,
economy.
you're always careful.
I said the discussion is on the economy. At the end of 1 hour of our conversation, all of them were critical about a range of issues, ranging from tax department, ED, this, that, corruption. So I asked them, I was told all of you are supporters of the BJP, but you only have complaints as business persons. So why are you? So they said, no, wo to Hindu party hai, hamara party hai. So, I think there is a problem with your MSMEs.
This is a genuine problem. I mean, I've interacted with them, so I work in that area quite a lot. They're all willing to tell you their problems.
Yeah.
None of them is willing to go and tell the
Government, yes.
That's
The
their
ED
problem.
will come there, the income tax, notice will come, and the CBI will start asking questions, the summons will be issued. They're all afraid of that. I mean, of course, I have great connections with my constituency, erstwhile constituency. People are afraid,
They don't
genuinely
know the
afraid.
problem. No, I mean, even FICCI and that PhD chamber, they do have MSME segments. But you look at the budget proposals that come out of there, they are no different from the budget proposals that are coming from the corporates. And I find it very difficult to believe from my conversations with individual MSME owners that the problems are the same. They're not. They're completely different. But there's an anodyne that gets presented. And that's a problem. There's a conversation, there's a communication gap.
But
that seems to
isn't
exist.
the fact that the savings rate has been going down over the years something to do?
Yes, yes and no. Yes, basically, much of it is in the household sector is very difficult to make out how, because much of the household sector is direct investments by them, which is also counted towards savings. But the reality is the silence on the investment side. To me, that is the fact that there is no forward-looking investment in analysis in the corporate sector. The MSMEs are in a very bad shape because we do not have a system which allows them to function efficiently and effectively. If I had to identify, suggest to the government, I say, please relook your industrial policy. Don't be so worried about what is being produced, etc. Try and liberalize, make it more federally open, do something special for MSMEs, and try and see in what way you can build a degree of dynamism in the corporate sector. This is what India needs if it wants to expand at 7.5%, 8%.
And otherwise, after all, Mr. Modi came to power saying minimum government, maximum governance.
Just the opposite. The opposite. I mean, what to do? The last thing I want to touch is on this oligopoly. The fact that the major assets of the country are being controlled by just a few people. I think that has a very demoralizing effect, not just in terms of investment. I mean, I know how, for example, the IBC system works. And there is a lot of behind the scene give and take. You take this and I will take that, right? And unfortunately, that's given the signal to the business community is that, look, you cannot function independently in the system at all. And that, I think, in terms of sending a message, sends a very, very negative message to the environment in which people want to invest.
No, that is absolutely true. I mean, we just talked about the 91 reforms.
Yeah.
Kapil, what were the 91 reforms? It was not opening. It was unshackling the corporate sector.
Correct.
Until then, we had something similar through the license permit regime, where the corporate sector was shackled. 91 just unshackled them and let loose their animal spirits. In a sense, we are there, except the shackles are not as obvious as they were then.
Right.
The shackles are much more insidious. They're probably a lot more political.
Yes.
So unshackling the corporates is going to be more difficult in terms of articulating what we think needs to be done.
No, only
We
if
know
the,
what the problem is.
Only if the politician holds himself back and say, let the economy function.
Go.
Yet, I won't interfere. I think that will create that environment. This is what I think.
Yeah, but that would be against the nature of the beast, right?
I'll tell you another story. Being a former journalist, I like stories. I was telling someone recently, you look at the news, I used to be an editor in the 90s, right, till the early 2000s. All the time we were under pressure, lobbying by businessmen who wanted their names to appear on the front page of newspapers. This guy is doing this, I'm opening this, I'm investing here, I'm buying this, there was a thirst for publicity of businessmen, and we were all being courted all the time. Give me photograph dalo. Yeah. I keep telling people, pick up a business newspaper of the last 5 years and see how many business leaders have appeared on the front page. Because I look at it every day, I can tell you, nobody wants publicity.
It's true.
Everybody is doing quietly whatever they're doing. No businessman seeks publicity today. Why should I attract attention? Phone call aega, electoral bond, this, that. Nobody wants publicity.
Right.
And that's the change of attitude which you need to, give them once again the confidence that go out, spend, invest. Nobody will come after you.
But they'll only get confidence if the court stands up.
Yeah.
This is absolutely true.
Look, that's the
in
other
all
challenge.
fairness to a government, to say that government should simply step back, do not have tax raids, may not be the best thing in the world.
Correct,
I mean, you know, there are laws and rules that
Have to
business
be
have
followed.
follow.
Yeah.
If you don't follow them, you deserve to be punished.
Correct.
Right? The question is, how do you do it? Are the due processes of law being seen to be followed?
That's correct.
Or does it appear arbitrary?
That's my fear. I mean, this country, unless the courts in India stand up and say, this is wrong, we will not allow you to do this. If you people are going to muddy the waters by filing suits and creating divisive agendas for the polity,
We'll penalize you.
we'll
for it.
penalize you for it. If you keep quiet, you won't get the environment in which the economy will prosper. It's as simple as that.
And maybe what the government should do, in the early 70s, there was a whole string of laws of tight controls on government, monopoly, distributive trade, lots of that. I'm not sure all of them have been taken care of as yet.
They haven't. They're still there on
I
the
think
books.
some of them are still around.
Yeah, but now with the new laws, new criminal laws, things are much worse.
Yeah, that's a difference.
that's
That
what
time
I
it was not
described
criminal
as a
laws, that time it was direct control.
They are much worse. And so Parliament doesn't discuss it. The courts don't do the things that they have to do. The business community is afraid. These issues are never in the public domain. We just discuss them here. And the government
And we
is more
discuss them only at a very, very superficial level.
superficial. And the government is only interested in how to win the next election. And that's where this country is. Well, thank you very much for being here with me to discuss some of these issues.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talking to all of you.
Thank you.